Hello, my name is Michael Starkey and I'm the Advisory Committee Chairman and an ecologist for Save the Frogs. Together we can save the frogs. And what you're watching right here is an introduction to tabling and effective advocacy as a volunteer for Save the Frogs. So let's get started. So I've spent a long time tabling for Save the Frogs and I've been to many events. And I want to share with you some tips that might make it easy for you to have an event for Save the Frogs. Now, if you're going to table for Save the Frogs, it's important to think about where you're going to table. There are many appropriate events all over the world that would, well, amphibians would benefit greatly if Save the Frogs was there. And as a volunteer, it's your duty to decide which event is best. So whether it's a nature festival, a rock concert, or even a farmer's market, you can hold a table for Save the Frogs. Also, a really great way to spread amphibian conservation is to hold a table on Save the Frogs Day. And so either way, whatever event you choose, it's always good to have a table out where you can spread the message of amphibian conservation. But first of all, it's important to understand, why are you tabling? Now, and I mean, why are you, as a volunteer, tabling? And so this is important to understand, or it's important to think about that, one, amphibians are the most threatened group of organisms on the planet. And you're tabling because you want to save them. And so you need to use that motivation and that passion to convince all the people that attend this event while they should check out Save the Frogs and learn how they can help amphibians. So it's really important to think about your appearance and perception too. So if we think about when we're saving frogs, well, we want to look good doing it. And so a few ways to do that actually would be to, one, dress nicely or have a nice bright Save the Frog shirt on. And you want your table to look, clean and neat and organized. If we look at the photo here, we see the merchandise is very cleanly stacked on top of each other and is available so people can look at it. And if we keep going down the table, we see a petition and information, as well as educational materials that are up, and so people can see it. And notice too, bright colors and interesting photos of frogs, and these attract people to the table. And this will benefit from getting people to come up and actually talk. So it's important to have a nice, clean, and neat-looking appearance. And it's important to be aware of your surroundings. So when we're at an event, it's important to understand that there might be lots and lots of people. So one thing that I like to do, and I encourage you to do, is invite your friends. Bring your friends, your family out to your event and table for the frogs. And so that way, everyone that comes up to the table, they have their questions answered. They have someone that can help them if they like to buy a T-shirt or some other merchandise, and they get to learn about wild frogs, learn about frogs. And it's also important for you because you don't want to be overwhelmed, the only person at this table, and there's so many people around you. So it's important to be aware of your surroundings and just make sure that you have enough people at your event, and that your table is also still looking neat. Kids like to move things around. Sometimes people will steal stuff off the table. It's unfortunate, but it happens. So it's important to kind of watch what's going on. And so when we're speaking to people and getting people to the table, it's really important to have clear communication. And so there are a few techniques about how you can get people to your table. And so one way that I do is I like to ask a question, because when people walk by the table, most of them will not stop. I would actually say about 90% of people will keep walking by, but they'll look. And so when that moment they're looking, that's your opportunity to say, can you help me save the frogs today? Or do you want to learn a cool fact about frogs? Or maybe can you help me with this, blank initiative in your town about, maybe there's a wetland that you have a petition that for, or there's, you're trying to ban the harmful pesticide atrazine. So something that draws them in. And then also other techniques too. It's nice to have things on the table that will just draw people in general. So not only are the cool frog merchandise there or the educational materials, but books or frog, statues or stuffed animals, things that might draw people in. They're like, oh, what's that? What's all this about frogs? And another thing that I like to do is always have an art station. So the art station is, so a part of the table is, just just for art. And if I'm lucky, I'll have 2 tables. One that I can dedicate just for art. And that's I have colored pencils, crayons out, and also printed frogs that kids can color. So they're blank, there's no color on the frog, and they can color them. Or they can make their own frogs. And that way, it encourages young people to come in, color some frogs, and then also the books will be out and the educational materials will be out. And so they're also learning about frogs during the process. And this is something you can do to easily get people to the table. And plus, the parents are going to be hanging out with their kids and they're going to be learning about frogs too. And that's your moment where you can educate those parents about how they can help frogs. And so some of these solicitation techniques and communication techniques will get people to your table. And it's important to be very prepared when you are tabling for Save the Frogs. And that means that you want to be prepared just to answer some commonly asked questions. And so these are some of them. What's happening to the frogs? Why should we save the frogs? Or maybe identification questions like, is it a frog or a toad? Or, what kind of salamanders are in my backyard? All these questions can be answered on the SaveTheFrogs.com website. And we highly recommend that if you're a volunteer, you should browse the SaveTheFrogs.com/how to help page and the threats facing frogs. Basically, some of the main web pages that just go through all these questions. And it's also really important to understand that you don't have to be an expert. It's not your job to save the frogs. You're basically a spokesman for the frogs, and you're just trying to make people aware. And so it's totally okay if you're learning too. And it's simple. If you don't have the answer, just say, I'm not so sure about that right now. Let me take your email and I'll get back to you. Or, that question might be answered on the SaveTheFrogs.com website. I'll have to check it out as well. You don't have to know everything. And don't feel bad if you can't answer every question. Sometimes you get some pretty strange questions. But the most important question is, how can I save the frogs? And that means you've captivated this person's interest and they actually want to help. Because when people ask that question, they're like, wow, okay, I want to do something. And that's your moment when you say, okay, go to the website, learn about the threats facing frogs, or refer back to the card. So this card right here I consider it to be like one of the most important little handouts that we've ever created. And this card talks about the threats that face amphibians, why frogs are important, but on the back, it's a very nice list of ways that people can help out in their individual homes or on a day-to-day basis. So that, referring back to that card, is essential. And if you don't have the cards, I highly recommend you write down those how to help things so you can tell people. For example, if you're at a nature festival and someone asks you how you can help how you can help frogs, tell them, well, don't use pesticides because those, drain off into the wetlands, or, don't use so much plastic, or live a green lifestyle, go vegetarian. Eating less meat is much better for our planet, for the environment. So it's really important to mention those things, but always being able to give that card to somebody, and that way they have something in their hand, they're going to hold on to it, and always tell them to pass it on to a friend when they're done with it, because we want to reuse these as much as possible. Now, when we talk about merchandise and donations, it's important to understand the second motive of why we table. The first is obviously because we want to spread information about the amphibian extinction crisis. Frogs are going extinct, and we need people to change their actions if we're going to save them. And so it's very, very important we have lots of materials that, basically spell all that out. And that way people, they learn. But the second is that we do want to raise money. Save the Frogs is a nonprofit organization, and like many nonprofits all over the world, we struggle to raise funds. And if we had more funds, we'd be able to expand our efforts around the world, uh, just to incredible degrees. So it's very, very important that we are also trying to raise money at these events. And so as a volunteer, there's a few ways that you can do that. And the simplest way is to sell merchandise. In our Save the Frogs gift center, we have many shirts, tote bags, water bottles, stickers, wristbands, mouse pads, and all kinds of cool frog things that if any frog lover passes by, they have to check it out. And so that's a simple way that you can, they come, they look at the shirt and like, these are awesome. And then you can tell them, all these proceeds go to help save the frogs. They're eco-friendly. Our shirts are printed on organic cotton. Mouse pads are made from recycled materials. Most of our information is printed on recycled paper. So just try and convince them, like, hey, you actually are helping the frogs by purchasing this. And that's true. And so, very, very important that you try and sell some merchandise if you're allowed to at your event. Some events will not, but always ask if you can. Now, if you can request donations, this is also very, very important. And so I like to have a big jar out, or maybe a box that says very clearly, written nicely, please donate to save the frogs. And so not only is it our organization's name, but it's a statement. And it's like, donate to save the frogs. You're helping us by donating some money. Because if everyone donated a little bit, we could all do a lot more. And so when you have that jar out, just place it down in a place that people can clearly see it. But one way that people can help the frogs is to donate. So don't forget to ask. It's very, very important to ask for donations. And don't feel afraid to do it. If you don't ask, you will not receive. And many people sometimes forget to donate, or they hear it all the time, or but if people want to help, this is actually one of the number one ways that people can help, because we are, Save the Frogs, our organization, we have people working for us that are incredibly dedicated, know how to save frogs from extinction, but we just do not have the funds to do what is needed to get done. And so by asking, we can help make our dreams of saving amphibians from extinction a reality. So never forget to ask. And I'd like to say too, putting that donation box or jar by the art station or by the information materials is good, because if people pick up some postcards, they might be inclined to donate because they feel like they're trading something. Even though most of our education materials are free, people will still like to donate. And also, when kids are coloring and making art, having that donation box right there, parents are like, well, my kid was entertained for 30 minutes, asked a lot of questions. I think I'll give the guys a few bucks. So, don't forget to ask, put that donation jar where people can see it. Now, I want to switch gears into talking about effective advocacy. And what I mean by that is, well, simply, in that moment, when you're with all these people, you are the voice of the frogs. You are someone that has captivated someone's interest, and you are going to tell them all about amphibians and all about the conservation of amphibians. And that's one of the most crucial things to realize, because you are the voice for all amphibians on the globe at that moment for that person. And we need to be as effective as possible if we are going to save amphibians from extinction. And so, number one, it's up to you. And remember that. It is your time to shine, and that is your moment to convey this to people. Talking about amphibian declines around the world, talking about your own experiences with frogs, but it's up to you to save the frogs at that time. And one, be polite. Always, always be polite. Be courteous, be respectful, and just make sure to always smile as much as possible. People like to smile, people like to have good conversation. And so if you're meeting lots of people that day at your event, always be sure to end it with a smile. Be passionate. Being passionate is one of the greatest things, because when you show your passion, show your enthusiasm to somebody, it's truly infectious. So you have the opportunity to persuade someone by your passion. And so convince them that frogs are, worth saving by talking about your own experiences. Whether if you traveled and saw frogs or frogs in your backyard at home, always talk about your own stories, and do it with, a way that really resonates with people, because people will go home thinking about, that frog person was really kind of interesting. Maybe I'll go check these guys out. And that's how they go back to the website, and that's how they learn, and that's how change happens. And then lastly, be persuasive. So persuasion, we want you to be persuasive in the sense that you have to be somewhat, I'm going to use the term dire, because it's true. Frogs are going extinct. We've never seen this rate of extinction. It's completely unnatural, and frogs are going extinct at this moment. And we need you to persuade that fact to people. And so, whatever you're trying to convince the person of, for example, why frogs are important, it's simple. Like, if people don't understand the importance of frogs, just ask them this: do you like mosquitoes? Do you like flies? Then, frogs control those bug populations. But that's one example. But if you have a petition, that's another thing that can be very hard to get people to sign, to be on board with it. And so find ways of kind of cutting through and persuading them over to your side, because most people, they do want to save frogs. No one wants frogs to go extinct. And so just get them on board on your side. And it's very important to also understand that you need to avoid confrontation at all costs. And so happens sometimes. And so that's why it's really important to be polite and always take the higher ground. Sometimes if there's something you say that doesn't, resonate with someone, and they disagree with what you're saying, then they can start to argue, or they can, say dismissive comments like, I like frog legs, or, I kill frogs all the time. And I've had people tell me that. And so it's important to always take the higher ground and try and convince them why that's wrong, or why that's a kind of a daft statement. And so if possible, avoid it. But if you can't, if someone's getting too aggressive with you, you have to say, hey, I don't like your tone right now. And if you please, maybe we can talk about this at another time. Take an info card, and I'm sorry we disagree. It's important to just remind them that, hey, you're being a little, aggressive right now. And also, being at a public event, other people will see that. And so that's why it's also really important to take that higher ground, because when people see that, this person's getting really aggressive and that you're keeping your cool, well, that makes you and Save the Frogs look really good. So always try to take that higher ground. And also remember, sometimes you may get people that they want to talk about depressing things. And, that might sound strange, but if you think about it, Save the Frogs is an organization that's working to reverse a very, very hard concept to grasp. So many species of amphibians have gone extinct, and it can be very hard to handle. And especially if someone's aware of that, or if they're aware that bees are going extinct and whales are going extinct and our rainforests are being clear cut, it can be a bit much. And so some people will come to you for almost like counseling, and it's important to realize that those people, they are very crucial to you, because they want to help. They do want to help. They just aren't sure how, and they want to feel good. And that's why it's so important to remember to tell them that there is hope, and there is hope. And so don't get depressed yourself. But there are many, many positive things that Say the Frogs is doing to help reverse these declines, and always bring it back to the frogs. Sometimes it can get overwhelming in these discussions. And so it's always important to bring it back to the frogs and stay on focus with amphibian conservation efforts, and leaving with them with the fact that they can help, and give them the tools how. Show them the card, bring them to the website, try and get a donation from them, because they've actually proven, money doesn't buy happiness, but giving money definitely gives lots of happiness. So try and get them to donate, and when they leave that conversation, they will be feeling better. And on the table, it's important to always have a few things that to whether it's icons, or information about, or topics that you want to discuss. And one is, you want to always talk about the website. So SaveTheFrogs.com has over 250 pages of amphibian knowledge. And so we want people to go to that, and we want people to use that information. So trying to get people to the website, get them to Facebook, get them to Twitter, follow us, and even become a member of Save the Frogs. And so that way people are being part of our tribe. They're coming towards supporting our mission, and we want to bring them on board as much as possible to gain more supporters. Many of these events are great networking opportunities, and so you may meet someone that could be a CEO of a giant company, and they're like, love what you're doing, and they want to help out. It's really important that you get them on board with our mission. So bring them to the website, prove to them the great work we're doing. Also, we want to talk about Save the Frogs Day, because Save the Frogs Day is our greatest achievement. And, we've had hundreds of events over the last 5 years. And on the sixth annual Save the Frogs Day on April 26, 2014, we're hoping to make it our largest day of amphibian conservation ever. So telling people, hey, this day is happening. We need you to hold an event, or go to an event nearby. And if you know of events nearby, tell people, because they will come if they find out there's cool events in their area. And then the Save the Frogs art contest and poetry contest are great things to discuss because it's different. It's not doom and gloom amphibian conservation, but really it's just a cool thing. Like, wow, we've had thousands of people from all over the world make really awesome frog art and poetry. And people think that's so cool. I mean, because it is. But it's really important to get them involved as well. If they're artists, if they're poets, anyone can enter. And it's fun things to encourage kids to get involved with, because it's a different form of conservation effort, because we've combined art and conservation together to reach a new audience that may never have heard about Save the Frogs. And so that's why it's been so successful, and we encourage many people to get involved. And then also, we want students to get involved. Me personally, this is very, very near and dear to me, because I believe very strongly that fostering the next generation to care about amphibians will save amphibians from extinction. Because if we have a society that doesn't respect and appreciate nature and wildlife, then those kids are going to grow up that they're not going to appreciate it. And so years down the road, when we're clear cutting forests or draining frog ponds, those kids are going to have they're not going to care, because what have frogs ever done to them? They won't know. And so that's why it's so important to get students involved. And students, on the SaveTheFrogs.com website for students, we have free information there that they can bring to their teachers. And so whether that's slideshows or information, um, we want them to go to that website and kind of do a little homework if possible. We also have pages dedicated to teachers or artists or lawyers or many different professions, because whatever profession you are or what level of education you are, you can help save the frogs. And so basically, we want to get everyone involved, because everyone can help save the frogs. And with that, that's kind of leads into this take home message, because I talked about, how volunteering for Save the Frogs, it can be a little tough sometimes, because you have this table, you have all this educational materials, and you're trying to convince people that may have never heard that frogs were going extinct, that frogs are important, they're going extinct, and we need to save them, and that person can save them. And the kind of alarming thing, though, is that you might have 30 seconds to convince them of that. Because when people are at these big events, they're trying to see so much, they're not thinking about frogs are going extinct. And so you have to captivate them, and you may only have 30 seconds to do it. So the take home message is yes, frogs are incredibly important. They're going extinct at a very unnatural rate from human caused events, and that they can change that by changing their everyday lifestyle choices and also helping save the frogs. And so get them that info card, and with a big smile, tell them you can save the frogs. Together we can save the frogs. So with that, it's I hope when you're out tabling that you're very successful. And if you have any questions, you can contact me at starkey@savethefrogs.com, or contact@savethefrogs.com, or visit our volunteer webpage. And I wish you the best of luck out there, and thank you so much for saving the frogs.